Good evening. My name is Ed Henley, and I will be the moderator tonight for the Murray Bowen Archives Project webinar, A Step Toward the Future, Why the Murray Bowen Archives and the Murray Bowen Archives Project are important. We do this at this time of year in honor of the anniversary of Dr. Murray Bowen's birthday, and we are so pleased to be able to celebrate his birthday in this way. We want to thank our sponsors this year. We have sponsors which allow us to offer this webinar without asking for a charge from registrants. And we want to thank Allison Whitney, Bill and Linda Dwyer, and the Kamek Family Fund for underwriting this webinar. We also have three special contributions tonight through video. Ms. Victoria Harrison, Dr. Michael Kerr, and the Reverend Randall Frost will have sent us presentations which we will be sharing with you this evening. We have some instructions from Elise Steenberg about the webinar this evening.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Elise Steenberg. I am the Administrative and Program Manager for the Murray Bowen Archives Project, and I'm here to just give a few guidelines for tonight's program. We ask that all guests please keep themselves muted throughout the presentation. Please submit any questions that arise throughout the presentation in the chat directed to Ed. He will be moderating the question and answer and putting everything together. Should any technical issues arise, please send a chat to me. Or if for some reason you get kicked out of Zoom or have really serious technical problems, please email me at info@murraybowenarchives.org. A link to this recording will be sent to all registrants after the event. Thank you.
We want to invite you to donate to the Murray Bowen Archives Project tonight. So we're going to post a link into the chat that will allow you to donate to TMBAP anytime during this webinar. Your support is what allows us to process this collection and to make it available for public use. What's nice about using this link is you will be able to continue to listen in on the webinar even as you donate. But should you have trouble navigating back to the Zoom meeting, please use the link that was originally mailed to you or email info@murraybowenarchives.org for assistance. Our agenda for the evening includes Researching the Archives by Catherine Rakow, a two-part presentation, Processing the Archives with Dr. Joanne Bowen, and also Processing the Archives by Priscilla Friesen, and then finally, TMBAP's Relationship to the Archives by Kent Webb. Catherine Rakow, in 1982, began her studies when working with families in a mental health outpatient setting. She knew immediately she needed a theory base for this. She began a program in Bowen theory under Paulina McCullough in Pittsburgh. In 1987, she joined the faculty of the Western Pennsylvania Family Center. It was in 1993 that Catherine began her journey in the archives when Mrs. Bowen loaned the National Institute of Mental Health research papers to the Georgetown Family Center. For 9 years, Catherine made monthly trips to Washington, reviewing and exploring the archival documents. When the NIMH papers moved to the National Library of Medicine, she did too. With the discovery of papers at the Bowen family home from 2012 to 2015, she traveled quarterly to Williamsburg, Virginia. Her guiding question throughout these years was, What was the base for the ideas in the theory? This past summer, she published her answer to that question in a book, which she will refer to. Today, she will speak about her journey through the archives, giving a perspective on the depth and breadth of the Bowen archives. Catherine has asked Teresa Edmondson to have a conversation with her, so the presentation will take that form this evening. So Catherine and Teresa.
Thank you, Reverend Henley. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I want to have a conversation with you. I hope to convey to you the wonder of discovery that can come from exploring the archives. Perhaps some inspiration will transfer across the Zoom barrier. And thank you, Teresa, for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you, Catherine. It's truly my pleasure to be here with you. I'd like to maybe begin our conversation with a fairly broad question, and that would be, in what ways has your access to the Bowen archives been important to you personally?
Well, I started looking in 1993 for a reference in Bowen's book about mother-daughter relationships. But once I started reading the material, I was hooked. And then my question became, well, where did these ideas come from? I'm a person who likes to know the thought behind the thought. So I kept reading, and pretty soon, years had gone by. I did gain over those years a deep respect for Bowen's fortitude and his persistence.
You've mentioned that you believe that a wide-ranging audience exists for Bowen's legacy, and that the information potential within the archives extends far beyond just students of Bowen theory. Can you give us some examples of what you mean by that?
Sure. I'll start at the broadest level. Those interested in American life in the 20th century would find something in the Bowen archives. In Bowen's correspondence, he recorded his travels, describing people, places, events from mundane to important, giving his observations and how he was taking this all in. They're beautiful in the description of his travels, and he traveled extensively across the United States and as far as Hawaii. There are World War II Army records. It's quite possible that a World War II buff might not think of the Bowen archives to look for World War II records. But Bowen did research in 1942 on early discharges of soldiers, and he was to assess what the problem was with this, as the Army really needed soldiers. And where he came out on that, where that there was a high number of psychosomatic disabilities. Bowen was interested in big unsolved problems, and the brain-body connection interested him. But to learn that, he had to turn to psychiatry. And so he did. But all of this was before going to the European front. When he went there, he was placed in charge of VD treatment. This was on the cusp of the use of penicillin. So this might be of interest to people studying the history of medicine. The VD treatment that was used then was arsenic, a very toxic substance, but had good results. And again, the brain-body connection. Bowen was able to observe this, and sometimes it made him nervous that how much toxicity was being given, but it worked. And this effort, the brain-body connection, actually shows up again in his own work at Menninger's. It foreshadowed his use of formaldehyde with alcoholics. Now, Bowen did triage at the Battle of the Bulge. One excerpt in my book is his Christmas letter, a very poignant letter in the middle of this. So again, what was a soldier knee-deep in helping and suffering soldiers. What was a Christmas like for them? Well, you can read that in the archives. One recent inquiry came into the Murray Bowen archives, and it intuited the potential in the archives. It asked if there were drawings and notes on Bowen's effort to create an artificial heart while in medical school. So for someone, that was a good question. For someone researching this, they would need to review Bowen's medical school records and find that joy of discovery for themselves. When it's time and you can go look at these records, something like that's not going to be highlighted and you go to this box or that folder, you're going to have to search through the 1939 records, because this was during one of his internships. And you're going to have to see what's in there and find out whether, in fact, there are drawings and notes. There's materials related to nursing and how the nurses' effort on Bowen's research asked far more than just making patients comfortable or dispensing medicine. The nurses were also his research assistants and observers, and they recorded the notes on each individual. And as you got further into the NIMH project, the notes actually change, where they start recording notes on the family. So I've named just a few possibilities of at the broad level of what people might be interested in.
Throughout his life, Bowen corresponded regularly with his family. Share with us some of what you found in the archives and what was the value of these documents to your own thinking and to your own research.
Bowen was a prolific letter writer. He had a unique style that would be today described as living in the moment. He lived out the idea of being a presence within your own family, being important to them and showing them they were important to him. He corresponded regularly with his family. I think there is a larger importance in his practice of staying connected to his extended family. So, that's one of the tenets in the theory, but he certainly practiced this in his own life. Living things communicate with each other for survival, from ants to honeybees, to elephants, to trees. Bowen certainly is an example of doing that in the human family. Bowen also corresponded with professionals, such as Nathan Ackerman, Don Jackson, Gregory Bateson, Virginia Satir, Carl Whitaker, and in the cross-fertilization with other professionals, he was open to the ideas, so they could expand his own ideas, or they could pose important challenges. Bowen was always looking for exceptions to his own thinking so that he could think more broadly. Bowen also had contact with families as early as 1946 at his Menninger residency. He also prescribed visits with families. There was a time in psychiatry where such contact was considered contrary to ethical practice. But my impression is once you had a relationship with Bowen, it was always there.
You've described, Catherine, the archives as a database showing how Bowen's theory evolved, how it developed. Can you give us a few examples of what you found?
Well, up until now, I've been talking about the broadness, the materials that can be found in the archives. Now I'm going to talk with you about the depth of the archives. The most important materials that I think are there are Bowen's research records from Menninger, from NIMH, from Georgetown. His experiments, the hypotheses he developed, how he used clinical practice for testing these, his observations. The data from this is the foundation of his theory. This information is there. I just used 10 years of this material. Years from 1955 on are waiting. Bowen also researched his own ancestral history. He explored the preceding generations of his own family in a manner that goes beyond standard genealogical searches. Bowen also was a pioneer in the early use of audio-visual recording. I came across audio recordings dating as early as 1954. Bowen considered theory outside of himself. So the use of audio and video recording was one more way of staying with facts rather than interpretations. And it was used as part of the treatment. The families on the NIMH project, the family staff meetings were recorded, and the families were expected to listen to these recordings before the next meeting so they could learn from them and figure some things out for themselves.
So until the archival collection is fully processed and is available to the rest of us, what research possibilities might be available in the here and now?
Well, even with clinical records presently closed to research, there are other sources where archival information is available to the public. I've asked Elise to put them into the chat so you can have them there for your own use. I'm going to speak to a few of them specifically. Dr. Bowen's, the first one I want to highly recommend is Dr. Bowen's paper from 1957. It was published in the Family Systems Journal in 1995, and it was a source for materials in my book. This paper was first started in 1951, describing his regression research, and there is information in there of relevance to today's world that could lead to further exploration. He didn't publish then. He then went back to it in 1957, and there's probably at least 20 drafts of this paper in the archives. I don't know why it wasn't published. My guess would be the timing wasn't right. Bowen was very conscious of timing, and the things that he writes about here were very different than how the world was, the psychiatric world was thinking about psychiatric problems. In this article, Bowen describes his research approach, his findings, how relationship conditions and the environment can regulate the presence of symptoms. That's what I think is still relevant to pay attention to today. It's an excellent narrative on Bowen's own shift to family, the importance of attitude and environment, and you will find this throughout the research, attitude and environment, and the importance of those two, and how he came to the foundations of the core concepts of differentiation of self and the emotional system. Differentiation is the innate growth toward individuality that exists in living things, and humans, all of us, we can use our brain to activate this. It is possible to regulate our inner emotional system to achieve greater autonomy and maturity within our family relationships. I want to mention the Family Systems Journal. That's where the 57 article was published. The Family Systems Journal has published an article from the archives in every one of its issues. So that's another source. I want to talk about Dr. John Butler's edited book and his second book, both of which use archival materials showing Bowen's contribution to the development of family psychotherapy in the 1950s, a notable event in psychiatry. And Butler looks in the second book at the work of Dr. Meissner and Bowen. Meissner was a research assistant to Dr. Bowen. Some of Dr. Meissner's research remains in the collection. Clarence Boyd edited the book Commitment to Principles, which is currently available for downloading on the TMB website for free. It contains letters from Dr. Bowen where he addresses his innermost thoughts and comments on relationships, theory development, the principles he's practiced in his own efforts spanning 40 years. And some of those letters go back to the 1940s from clients' families and from NIMH research participants who are still in contact with Dr. Bowen up till 1990. There's another book, Dr. Hall, by Dr. Margaret Hall, who published the first book on Bowen theory in 1979. She had close consultation with Dr. Bowen while writing it. There are drafts of her works in the archives, and her book is available as a free download. Dr. Deborah Weinstein used the Bowen archives and recorded Bowen's place in the mid-20th century shift in America towards systems thinking, families, and the rise of family psychotherapy. That leaves the worldwide shift toward family in mid-20th century still there for someone else to explore. And among the videos at the National Library of Medicine and also at the Western Pennsylvania Family Center, there's a day-long seminar done by Dr. Brody and Mrs. Betty Basmania, the social worker on the project. You can hear in their own words what life on the ward was like and the content of their research discussions. And I would like to mention the Murray Bowen Archives Project website. It's a resource for Bowen materials, as well as updates on the collection. There are selected excerpts from Bowen's videos available there as well, published monthly, and they are closed captioned to enhance audio accessibility.
And thank you, Elise, for putting a link to all of those references in chat, so we can go directly to those if we would like. So you've been in the National Library of Medicine. How would you describe your experience at NLM?
Well, if I weren't researching Bowen's archives, I don't know if I would have ever gone there, but I can tell you it's a science and history of medicine researcher's dream. It's accessible worldwide. On my visits there, which were monthly for many years, the staff was always helpful. The collections there date back 1,000 years. They have a fascinating blog named Circulating Now that highlights historical medical materials in their collection. I would highly recommend getting familiar with this invaluable resource. Materials there, there's a free download. It's called Hidden Treasure, and it's a spectacular 240-page full-color book with 450 images and over 80 essays authored by distinguished scholars on health, medicine, and the body. One person who knows this book, and I'm going to quote, said, "Opening this volume is like lifting the lid on a treasure chest. If you want to know more about it, go to Google and put in hidden treasure, NLM, and it'll take you to it, and you can see for yourself."
Thank you, Catherine. Your passion and your commitment to research truly does inspire me, and I appreciate all of these ideas. Before we close, do you have any final comments or observations that you would like to make about your own experiences with the archives?
Well, Bowen lived in the same world you and I live in, but he thought differently. He thought that human potential could be explored well beyond current knowledge. He was willing to take that on. He didn't start off to develop a new theory. He simply wanted to work from a more factual theory, including the human as a part of nature. And clinical practice was his testing ground to move toward a science of the human. For myself, what I found is as I went through materials, I was able to layer my understandings from one material to a next, pretty soon forming a comprehensive understanding. There were many discoveries I made there, and it was well worth the time I put into it. I'm a better person for it. Anyhow, Bowen's legacy is in his theory, and his documentation of it is in the archives. The theory is there for us to make use of, perhaps even to advance it further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine Rakow and Teresa Edmondson. Catherine's book, Making Sense of Human Life, Murray Bowen's Determined Effort Towards Family Systems Theory, recently published by Routledge. So thank you. And please put any questions into the chat, direct them to me, and after the next full presentation, we will have an opportunity to consider some of these questions. I want to introduce, though, a short video by Ms. Victoria Harrison. She is a member of the Bowen Center faculty and director of the Center for the Study of Natural Systems and the Family in Houston. She's an avid researcher and author of the Family Diagram and Family Research.
Good afternoon. Most of you know that I'm Victoria Harrison, and I am grateful for this opportunity to say a few words about what I think is so important about the Murray Bowen Archives project. I was fortunate to be under Dr. Bowen's direct influence when he was alive, and I was able to take advantage of his thinking for my own personal life, but also for research, teaching, and training. The Murray Bowen Archives project is now the closest we're going to get to that. And I believe that the original work in the Archives project that is both electronic and print is necessary for the development and expansion of Bowen family systems theory and its applications for the future. I consider this one of the most important organizations and projects for one's time, thinking, and money. Many thanks to those who have spent many hours into the big numbers on this project. I look forward to its availability in my lifetime. Thank you.
Hey, we thank Victoria Harrison
Good
for
afternoon.
that
Most of-
presentation. Oh, we want to stop her now. There we go. We thank her for that video presentation and appearance here and her support of the archives
Good afternoon.
project. All right.
Most of
There we go. Our next speaker is Dr. Joanne Bowen, and she is a former senior curator of environmental archaeology at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation and research professor in anthropology at the College of William and Mary. Her interest in anthropology and Bowen theory began as a teenager. Growing up in Murray Bowen's home in Washington, D.C., she lived with her father's research interests as well as all the families in the diplomatic corps. As an undergrad at the innovative Beloit College, she spent a semester in Taiwan and another in Santa Fe on a field term at the Museum of New Mexico. This last experience focused her desire to become a curator in archaeology. She went on to Brown University, where she developed a specialty in zooarchaeology. Living in New England, her focus expanded from a deep interest in cultures to include history, the evolution of human societies, landscape ecology, and human-animal relationships. As curator in a major living history museum, she learned from historians and museum professionals the research and curatorial skills she needed to ensure Murray Bowen's archival legacy would be safe as he wished in the National Library of Medicine. She is grateful for what her colleagues taught her and for what she learned observing her father and being part of his family life. Dr. Bowen.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Henley. So what you see here is a picture of a young Dr. Bowen standing in front of an ambulance. On the back, he typed, "At Bellevue Site, October 1939. This image conveys how the discovery of one item can revise or broaden assumptions about an individual's history. In this case, Bowen's interest in psychiatry likely predates his time at Fort Bragg. To me, this image beckons researchers to delve into his archival records to explore how Bowen saw what others could not. He published relatively little during his lifetime, but worked tirelessly. With audiovisual media, he recorded clinical sessions, workshops, and meetings. Typing with 2 fingers, he produced paper records exceeding those of Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud. With his camera, he recorded snapshots of his life. As a result, his archives are a treasure trove for scholars who would otherwise rely on his publications and third-hand interpretations unmoored from his foundational research. Libraries like NLM strive to acquire the breadth of a creator's work. This is the first step to acquire a collection. Through a legal document known as the Deed of Gift, NLM has accepted 4 collections to date and is anticipating a 5th. This document serves the interest of both the receiving library and the donor. Libraries require clear title. Donors agree on what is to be donated. They relinquish ownership upon transfer, and they negotiate restrictions. In 1989, NLM acquired a group of early videos capturing clinical work with families. In 2002, the Bowen family donated the entirety of his collection. In 2007, the Bowen Center donated his AV collection to NLM with the agreement that they withhold materials they would use for educational purposes. In 2019, Mary Bourne's heir, Louisa Cannon, donated audio recordings from Bowen seminars at the Minnesota Institute of Family Dynamics, where he believed he could synthesize his theory. In 2019, Andrea Shara donated photographs she took during professional meetings at the Bowen Center and throughout the country. At present, the Bowen Center is working toward donating its organizational record. And as you see on the bottom, other organizations may have recordings of Bowen's engagements. Each might consider how they can preserve their archives for future generations and provide online access for those who are interested. What is essential to recognize is that separately, each collection is a lens into the context in which Dr. Bowen worked. In their totality, his archives reveal how he practiced science, knowing there was always more to know if one could only observe, analyze, refine, and never assume one knew the answer. Next, this is a diagram showing where Dr. Bowen's archives are currently located. On the top is a list of records the Bowen family deeded to NLM. They include manuscripts, clinical records, military and administrative records, correspondence, medical school notes, photographs, and family papers. On the left are papers Dr. Bowen took to the center, plus records his wife, Leroy, loaned to the Bowen Center. Among them are manuscripts, correspondence, and memorabilia. On the right are documents I moved to Williamsburg in 2011. On the bottom are documents Leroy Bowen had transferred to NLM by 2011. Next slide, please. An initial step is to survey a creator's records in their workplace and, oh, could you go back one, please? Oh my gosh, these are out of order. Well, let me see what we can do. An initial step, go down one more, please. An initial step is to survey a creator's records in their workplace and home. In 2011, History Associates, an archival company NLM frequently uses, surveyed records located in Bowen's home and primary workplace, the Georgetown Family Center. And could you go to the next slide, please? This inventory lists the breadth and depth of Dr. Bowen's archival legacy. Next slide, please. In 2002, after the Bowen family completed their deed of gift, Leroy Bowen began transferring records. This image shows curator John Reese accepting a transfer on NLM's loading dock. Next slide, please. On the left is a box of Dr. Bowen's unprocessed records. As Mrs. Bowen transferred boxes like this one, archivists established physical control by numbering boxes and creating a list of the contents. However, archivists want the entire collection to be in their hands before taking the next step, which they call final processing. Why? Working with all records at once is cost-effective. Equally important, archivists need to understand the creator's intellectual arrangement, how they created and accessed their records. Records are meant to be consulted, and archivists organize and document the content of groups of records in a way that retains the intellectual arrangement and is easy for researchers to navigate. Using information they learned, archivists develop categories they call series and subseries. They then physically separate items into series, place them in boxes, and create a new inventory. When this work is done, then and only then will they begin scanning records for release on the web. Now I want to describe work being done in Williamsburg. In 2011, when Leroy Bowen moved to Frederick, Maryland, my siblings and I cleared out our home and found boxes tucked in the attic eaves. They had not been opened since 1954 when he began his research at NIH. What a wonderful time capsule of his early professional life. They include his medical school notes, a microscopic slide collection, military records, memorabilia, photographs, manuscripts, and published papers. In addition, they include a large cache of letters to both professionals and family members. At this time, my siblings and I assumed responsibility to transfer the remaining records, including family papers our mother had set aside, along with the early records we discovered in the attic. Once these records were in Williamsburg, I became their custodian. I secured a climate-controlled storage unit, and my brother Charles and I constructed shelves and established physical control by numbering and labeling boxes. Volunteers helped to create folders. Next, at this time, I knew TMBAP board members would benefit by experiencing this wonderful collection. TMBAP opted to hold a board retreat and combine it with 2 days of read-ins. The excitement and potential grew, and soon a plan emerged. Next, please. Catherine Rakow would lead a group composed of Bowen family members, including me, Kathleen Bowen Noer, and Dr. Judith Bowen, and 15 volunteers to prepare this collection. You can see in this picture, Catherine, Judy Bowen, and Andrea Shera. TMBAP provided lodging and lunches, and together we worked 3 years to separate family from professional papers and produce lists of the contents. Subsequent work by volunteers led by Carol Jeanette continued to separate family letters. This work is in progress. So next slide, please. This work is detailed and time-consuming. On the right is a picture taken by Andrea Shera showing her day's work, a pile of rusty paper clips and staples. Volunteers learn common staple removers, shred fragile carbon copy paper, and they became adept at using the spatula you see on the left. As they worked, volunteers discovered the importance of careful archiving. Astonished by the breadth of what Bowen preserved, each developed a deep appreciation of Bowen's lifelong effort to record his Odyssey. So next, please. An important outcome of the initial project was to better understand the task facing my family, NLM, and TMBAP. The task is complex because clinical, professional, and family records are integrated. I understood it would take time to take this raw collection to a place where NLM could release it to the public. First, the collection's in several locations, and it contains multiple media. Developing plans with costs requires detailed knowledge of the material with an end goal to making them accessible to the public. Libraries solve this challenge by developing phase steps to reach the end goal. Each phase is developed to produce information needed to plan the next phase. Second, Bowen's collection is intellectually unique among medical and psychiatric collections. To Bowen, everyone and anything was to be observed and understood. During his career, he produced files upon files of records of clients, colleagues, and institutional records, all interspersed with family records. Preserving Bowen's legacy will require NLM developing nuanced archival protocols that will enable curators to open and release his important theoretical contributions, while at the same time protecting individuals and their families' privacy using personal health information articulated in the HIPAA regulations. His records are also unique in that he related to everyone the same way, personally, with his own privacy guidelines. In his relationships, personal information stayed in the relationship, including the written communications. So opening his collection requires NLM addressing confidentiality while allowing access to rich theoretical examples each personal letter includes. Bowen professionals and my family are working to develop protocols that capture how Dr. Bowen respected the privacy of the others while making valuable theoretical writing available. So recall, NLM requires the entire collection to be in their hands before initiating final processing. Fortunately, NLM understands Bowen family letters served as his field notes. They also understand these letters are his family's history and that it will take time to know what to keep, what to transfer, and how to respect privacy. With my assurance that I separate all professional records and transfer them before working with family records, NLM's curators have agreed to initiate final processing before they receive Bowen's family papers. Next, please. Here is a letter written to the family shortly before he was discharged from the Army and during his first year as a resident at the Miniger Foundation. Note how difficult it is to read. I'm sure you're looking closely. This is why I chose it, so you could experience the challenge facing NLM. Dr. Bowen made carbon copies, keeping one for himself. The paper is thin and porous, and each successive copy is fuzzier. Fortunately, archivists have protocols for producing readable copies, and new technologies are making their job easier. Privacy presents more challenges. PHI protocols require the redaction of any information that would lead to the identification of a client's identity. With Bowen's records, personal relationships embody his professional work. There is no clear way to distinguish client from others. This includes his own family. Redaction is an onerous, time-consuming task. Hopefully, when NLM is ready to scan material, new technology may shorten this step. As you can see, his letters are dense. In this one, he began by comparing Kansas weather to what he had experienced a year before in France. So next, please. Then in one paragraph, you see he described a pageant of 177 Native groups who had gathered to commemorate the part they had played in World War II. Bowen left thinking about their knowledge of their ancestors and the treatment they had suffered. His description signaled he understood the human dilemma he would come to know as societal emotional process. He wrote, "It's an experience hearing these Native people speak in their language and portray each major change in status they had experienced from the first time the white man came to the present." He concluded, "I hope our government sees fit to integrate these people into the rest of our civilization to right one of the greatest wrongs ever done to a people, to keep them as wards of the people." So this demonstrates, Dr. Bowen wrote freely in this media. Each observation or thought was a kernel of knowledge that would lead to his next idea, his next discovery. There are hundreds, maybe more of these letters. My family and TMBAP are committed to ensuring his field notes will join his archive collection at NLM. When our work is done and NLM completes its work, the world will be the beneficiary of his wisdom and vision. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Bowen, for your presentation. And we have some time here for some questions and answers. And if you'd like to put them in the chat to either of our first two presenters. And I have one up here that I believe is directed towards Catherine. It speaks of the shift in thinking in the mid-20th century towards system thinking. And questioner is wondering, is this referring to all sciences or speaking about psychiatry alone or medical thinking or just Murray Bowen's thinking? And some question for Catherine Rakow on that statement.
All right. Well, thank you for your question. What I was talking about there was the work of Dr. Deborah Weinstein, who looked at the rise of families in the mid-1950s. It occurred across America. People were beginning to pay attention in a way. She goes back into the 1930s and 40s and looks at the Bateson and Jackson and Bowen. She had access to archives where she could look at this emergence occurring among various people, and family psychotherapy occurred also. These people were not talking to each other. They were moving forward on their own understanding beyond the individual, what was going on, how to understand impairments, serious impairments. And I think Dr. Weinstein does an excellent job of looking at this in America. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you so much. And we also have in our schedule an opportunity for a 5-minute break. So if we go ahead and initiate that break right now, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat during this time period. But let us go ahead and begin a 5-minute break and return at just 2 minutes before the hour. as we're at this time near the end of our break, in the chat, there is the link, which is there if you would like to make a donation to the Murray Bowen Archives Project. You can click on the link in the chat and it will take you to a donation place. So thank you. As we resume our webinar, we have a short presentation sent to us by Dr. Michael Kerr. Dr. Kerr served as director of the Georgetown Family Center after having been a long-term colleague of Dr. Bowen. And then the Georgetown Family Center, which became the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family. He is the author of several books on Bowen theory, and he is the director of the Bowen Theory Academy based in Maine. So we welcome this short presentation by Dr. Michael Kerr.
I will start first with the tremendous effort the Murray Bowen Archives team puts in. It reflects, of course, the solid recognition that Dr. Bowen did earn the right to sit on the King's Row, something he told Leroy early in his career that he would do someday. Dr. Bowen had an incredibly positive impact on my personal and professional lives. It was literally off the charts. I was indeed fortunate to first cross paths with him in my junior year of medical school at Georgetown. Our Bowen Theory Academy website will soon include a short section entitled Systems Miracle. It is my way to express Dr. Bowen's original ideas. Applying systems thinking in the study of family relationships makes it possible to gain an enhanced level of emotional objectivity about the processes being observed. It also enhances emotional neutrality, meaning able to observe without taking sides and blaming the relationship processes on a particular family member. The next and very important step is taking action guided by emotional objectivity and neutrality. If one family member can do this, others will follow, resulting in a small increase in a family's level of emotional maturity. This effort by one family member often triggers other family members to act more maturely. Over time, this can result in a significant gain in maturity level for a family, or what Bowen theory terms as differentiation. Murray, I thank you hundreds of times over, knowing, of course, that he didn't do it for me. He did it for all of humankind.
Hey, we give thanks that Dr. Kerr was able to send that video to us for this evening. Our next presenter is Priscilla Friesen. Ms. Friesen was introduced to Bowen theory in 1976 in graduate school at the University of Kansas. She moved to the District of Columbia to participate in the training program at the Georgetown Family Center. That began what is now 47 years of involvement in Bowen theory, ultimately directing the postgraduate training program for 13 years, and as a practitioner, researcher, incorporating neurofeedback into work with family and business systems. She writes, my involvement with the archives began in 1980, shortly before Dr. Bowen's death. He invited me to work with his family and the Bowen Center to make his archives a reality. Learning about the preservation, organization, and accessibility of an individual's life, work, and legacy is both a big picture and a detailed endeavor. And the archiving process has required knowing Bowen theory more than one might imagine. Thank you. Priscilla Friesen.
Thank you, Reverend Henley. So my job in this is to kind of describe what it takes to actually do the archiving project. What does the project look like? How much time does it take? How much does it cost? To illustrate these questions, I'm highlighting projects that TMBAP has supported by your contributions. The Mary Bourne Collection was the first project TMBAP financially supported. Joanne mentioned the importance of this collection in her talk. In 2019, TMBAP supported the physical transfer of this collection. Louisa Cannon, Mary Bourne's daughter, prepared the materials. Louisa and her husband, Patrick, physically brought the materials to NLM from Minnesota. In addition to the material transfer, it was an opportunity for the Bourne family heirs to receive the appreciation for this collection from NLM and from the Bowen family heirs. This was an opportunity to connect to the Murray Bowen collection and to appreciate the Bourne contribution to it. The cost of this project was $2,600. The photograph collection includes slides, negatives, and photographs totaling 1,559 individual photos taken by Andrea Shera from 1974 to 1990. This collection includes numerous photographs of Dr. Bowen, invited guest scientists, faculty, trainees, participants, and family center social activities. This is an important collection that parallels the other materials present at NLM and in the Bowen Center institutional records. This project is the second proposal for TMBAP. It included hours of volunteer time. Andrea, Amy Post, and I spent a few days at the Bowen Center first deconstructing photo albums and selecting quality photographs. Amy Post spent 32 hours developing the metadata categories and filling in identification of people, places, and times. And now let me step back for a moment. So what is this metadata? So at the bottom of this slide, you see a spreadsheet that lists the identifying categories of album, photo number, date, event, and who is in the photo. Metadata are the categories of information that provide a context for an archival object. It facilitates the navigation through connecting disparate parts of the collection as a whole. So, for example, these photographs of this symposium that you see in the boxed areas to the left will link to papers and correspondence about the event in the Bowen Center institutional records and others at NLM. This linking of information of different parts of the broader collection provides a more expansive understanding of the development of the theory and will help researchers find the particular information they may be looking for. So in this case, for those of you familiar, John Bonner is highlighted in discussion with Dr. Bowen at a Bowen Center symposium. In this slide, you can see the next archiving step. After each photograph is put into a sleeve, a protective sleeve, it is given an identifying number, which you see at the top of the sleeve, that associates with the photograph. This identifier, in this case, the album and photo numbers, become the name of the physical and digital file and is linked to the information about that picture in the metadata. So 44-9 is the name of this picture. The physical copies are stored in archival boxes. A list is included in the front of each box that documents what is in that box. These boxes were then sent to a vendor for digitization. The next step includes linking the digital copy with the metadata. Elise Sternberg and I checked for accurate spelling and made sure the order of the listing of individuals matched their position in the photograph. This took a total of 61 hours between us. We are particularly thankful for the anonymous donor who paid for the cost of phase 1, $5,948 in total. We are now ready for phase 2, as Andrea Shera discovered 500 additional negatives in her recent move. This includes digitizing the negatives. Elise and I will enter the metadata, linking it to the digital copy. The total cost for phase 2 is $1,350, and it will be completed in 2023. When phase 2 is completed, copies of this collection will be transferred not only to NLM, where the actual physical copies will be donated, but copies will also go to Andrea, the Bowen family, the Bowen Center, and TMBAP. The Bowen Center Library was developed in 1990 after Dr. Bowen died in October, and the Bowen Center moved into the physical space at 4400 MacArthur Boulevard at the end of that same October of 1990. Mrs. Bowen donated money to build the bookcases and purchase the conference table, chairs, and desk. Mrs. Bowen and Ruth Sager worked to develop the library you see in the upper right corner of this slide. The Bowen Library holds original books from the early history of family therapy, as well as books and journals of the developing world of Bowen family systems theory. It has filled its shelves over the past 30 years. The Bowen family created the inventory of Dr. Bowen's home library in 2011. The Bowen Center Library Inventory expands the perspective of what influences were present impacting Bowen and his theory. Now, this inventory's purpose is twofold. Number one is to present an inventory to National Library of Medicine as they consider materials for accession through the Bowen Center deed of gift. Secondly, to make available to researchers the breadth of materials in the history of Dr. Bowen's work in the context of the evolution of family therapy and family systems theory's engagement with other scientists, including those who have been connected personally to the Bowen Center through participation in symposiums. In addition, it importantly highlights what's called the gray materials. These are materials that were produced by the Bowen Center, including Family Center reports, for example, a substantive journal-like newsletter before the Family Systems Journal began. Gray materials also include symposium proceedings unavailable in libraries. In addition, there are copies of many of the PhD dissertations that were based in Bowen theory. Now, from a research perspective, this collection shines a light on the context in which Bowen theory developed and grew. This collection also includes the publications of Bowen theory. Elise Steinberg and Minyoung Cho are shown in the upper portion working on this project. They developed and populated the inventory of materials and then scanned the title page and the table of contents, developing a robust research tool. This 9-month project will be completed in February of this year. TMBAP supported this Bowen Center project for $13,930. Now, Amy Post is taking the lead on working with the whole of the Bowen Center institutional records. TMBAP is working with the Bowen Center to clarify the materials that will be transferred to NLM through the Bowen Center deed of gift. NLM is only interested in the work of the Bowen Center when Bowen was alive. The Bowen Center, however, has a remarkable institutional record of what has been done in the past 30 years of impact in Bowen theory after his death, included training, symposium, and exchanges with scientists. At the Bowen Center, Amy is developing a plan to organize both, 1, the Bowen Center materials to be donated to NLM, and 2, the Bowen Center archives itself. TMBAP will work with the Bowen Center, providing support to maintaining their own institutional history and transferring materials to NLM, documenting the importance of the Bowen Center in the Murray Bowen archives. Its history illustrates the founding and development of an organization based in natural systems theory, including the concept of differentiation of self in organizations. It illustrates how Bowen developed his ideas theoretically as well as its application. So in this phase 1, in the preliminary state we are in right now, there will be an assessment of what is materially at the center, defining those materials to be transferred again to NLM, an assessment of the present video room, which contains all the tapes, materials from 1990, considering digitization and processing these tapes, evaluating the materials for the Bowen Center processing, and develop privacy guidelines for personnel training and faculty records. Amy is aiming for a volunteer work-in in the summer of 2023. Proposals are expected for organizing materials at NLM and for digitizing materials for both NLM and the Bowen Center. Now, on the left-hand side of this slide, you will see the green slips of paper in these files that indicate the separation process that Joanne Bowen is working on, supported by TMBAP funding. The archiving process distinguishes between Bowen's personal legacy and his work on behalf of the organization. The separation project reflects the recent survey of Murray Bowen's papers at the Bowen Center. This survey found that the Bowen Center collection has several of Dr. Bowen's personal papers, his intellectual property, and this project is separating Dr. Bowen's intellectual property from that of the Bowen Centers. So you may say, so what? Now, from an archival perspective, separating his personal correspondence from his institutional responsibilities clarifies what Joanne referred to earlier, knowing how Bowen worked, including where, at his home office and at the Bowen Center office. This will ultimately assist NLM's archivist to develop series that truly reflect Bowen's intellectual arrangement, how he used and accessed his records. The cost for this project is $11,855. Joanne Bowen and Kathleen Bowen Knorr will complete this project in February or March, after which the records will be transferred directly to NLM through the Bowen family deed of gift. The complexity of Bowen's archives is such that Joanne Bowen, with NLM's guidance, is planning phased work, as she described, where one phase will produce information needed to identify tasks and costs for the next phase. The assessment project is designed to produce information needed to do step 2. Step 2 is the preparing the professional collection for transfer to NLM. This is done prior to doing step 3, which is transferring the Bowen family papers to NLM. This step assessment is conducted with the assistance of Susan Andrews, a professional curator, as you see on this slide. All family papers will be systematically separated from any remaining professional papers. Recent discoveries of unopened letters have introduced more complexity to the collection and in Williamsburg. An undetermined number of professional and family records remain intermixed, and boxes of photos include written records. TMBAP is providing $24,661.73 to support this project, which began just last week. This project will be completed this coming summer. Now, in addition, from 2011 to the present, TMBAP, its volunteers, and the Bowen family have supported this vital work in Williamsburg. Each has contributed hundreds of volunteer hours, and TMBAP provided lodging and lunches for the volunteers. Days were filled with excitement as they discovered the depth and the breadth of this collection. We are grateful for their generous support and hope this collaboration continues long into the future. Now, as you can see, a lot has been done these past 3 years, even in the midst of COVID. TMBAP is developing a track record that it can develop the phased proposals that build to the next step. And this work being done is supported by TMBAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla Friesen, and I want to thank you and Dr. Joanne Bowen for introducing us into the practicalities and the breadth and the depth and the scope of this archival work. We have a video appearance by Randy Frost, and Randall Frost for many years was the director of Living Systems in Vancouver, British Columbia, and he is now the director of the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family.
Hello, I was invited by Kent Webb on behalf of the Archives Project to say a few words about the importance of the Archives Project. Happy to do so. In Dr. Bowen's published writing, we have the conclusions he drew from his research at Menninger's and NIMH. The work of the Archives Project captures the process that led to the theory. We can read what Dr. Bowen was thinking as he conducted experiments with patients and their families. We can access his background thinking, review the clinical evidence, and follow his reasoning step by step. The records in the archives demonstrate systems thinking in action. Bowen theory is still a work in progress. To understand how the theory can develop further, it really helps to know how it got to where it is today. Dr. Bowen once remarked to me that he was looking forward to the day when we could get the word Bowen out of Bowen theory altogether. The Archives Project, by focusing attention on how Dr. Bowen developed the theory, the clinical evidence on which the theory rests, and the theory's potential contribution to science, actually make the archives more about a science of the human than the man who took us to where we are today. I think Dr. Bowen would approve this way of describing the mission.
Thank you, Randy Frost, for sending us that video. Our concluding speaker, and then he will then come back for final comments, is Kent Webb. And Kent Webb, licensed clinical social worker, is an executive coach, leadership consultant, and mental health professional. He owns Webb Associates and the Practice of Inclusion, LLC. Webb Associates is located in Denver, Colorado, is an outgrowth of a unique career experience spanning the business world and mental health profession. He studied with Dr. Bowen for 3 years and was coached by him for 5 years. He has presented papers at conferences at the Bowen Center in Washington, D.C., the Family Center for Consultation in Illinois, and at the Western Pennsylvania Family Center in Pittsburgh. His area of interest is the gay male's development of self from a Bowen theory perspective. The mayor of Denver recently appointed him to the city's Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Commission. Mr. Webb is on the faculty of the Bowen Center for the Study of the Family and teaches in the programs in the center's Differentiation at Work program. Please put your questions in the chat, and for both Kent Webb and Priscilla Friesen, and we will return to those after the presentation by Kent Webb. Kent?
Well, who is this organization, the Murray Bowen Archives Project? It's an independent, standalone 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's dedicated to the preservation and accessibility of original materials in all media related to Bowen family systems theory and its originator, Dr. Murray Bowen. As such, it serves as a resource to all Bowen educational centers, researchers, professionals, and the public interested in this theory. TMBAP's purpose is clearly stated in its vision and mission. Its vision and mission both are unique among all the Bowen international networks addressing Bowen theory. Its vision is that Murray Bowen's archives will be available to the world to advance the understanding of his theory of human behavior, its development, and integration with the natural sciences. And its mission is to obtain the resources that are necessary to fulfill the vision, to advance scholarship, and enhance public knowledge of these archives. Wow, from a 32,000-foot view, how is this organization important? It's a financial resource and funding entity for the preservation and accessibility of all Dr. Bowen's archival original materials. And its value. TMBAP understands, we understand the depth and breadth of his archival collection, and we acknowledge that it's large, it's complex, it's challenging to make easily available to researchers and the public. There are many examples of what we have and will tackle in the near future. The collection contains professional papers, professional, personal, and family correspondence, video and audio tapes, photographs, books, and personal memorabilia, such as his desk and doctor's bag. The collection must be processed to meet preservation standards, and aspects of the collection must be processed in a manner that protects the privacy and the confidentiality of others. The collection is unwieldy in that it rests in different locations. It's at the National Library of Medicine. It's at the Bowen Center, and with the Bowen family, known as the Williamsburg Project, and with Andrea Shera. As well, other organizations around the world may have their own original works to house and might request assistance from TMBAP regarding how they might properly archive their collection of his works. In addition to the deeds of gift collection being in various locations, with their destination eventually being NLM, aspects of the collection are also in various stages of processing. For clarification, a deed of gift, as defined by Wikipedia, is a signed legal document that voluntarily and without recompense transfers ownership of real, personal, or intellectual property, such as a gift of materials from one person or institution to another. After a deed of gift is completed, transfers of records can and do occur over many years, as in the case of the Williamsburg Project materials that are owned by the Bowen heirs and at the Bowen Center. TMBAP is working closely with NLM to ensure that TMBAP is funding and overseeing archival preparation processes of the collection not yet delivered to NLM to ensure they will arrive in as much of a final process state as possible, with the intention that the materials will become easily available to the public and to researchers without much additional cost or delay. In summary, and at the end of the day, when the remaining aspects of the collection arrives at NLM, they will have been prepared in a way that meets their final archival processing standards. How are we of value to the Bowen Worldwide Network? There are numerous national and international organizations with their own original Bowen works who may not have the wide-ranging, and you've heard tonight, the wide-ranging resources to final process their materials or understand archival processes. Such entities could consider TMBAP a resource in a variety of ways, including consultation. And then what is TMBAP's relationship to NLM? NLM has limited resources to process, preserve, and make available the collection in numerous media. Additionally, NLM is not allowed to fundraise, and therefore is not able to seek contributions for processing Dr. Bowen's archival collection. And it's with that reality that Dr. Bowen's archives may take many, many years to become easily and fully accessible at NLM. The work that TMBAP does to final process materials before delivery to NLM, it's imperative and it's necessary. Many times the question comes, what aspects of the archives have been processed? NLM has completed initial processing of the paper archives presently located at the library and is open to approved researchers by NLM. An operating principle of the library is that final processing only begins when all materials from the 4 deeds of gift have been delivered to NLM. So there's an initial processing, and then there's a final processing. Another question that's often presented or asked is, what aspects of the archives has TMBAP processed? TMBAP volunteers prepared significant portions of the Williamsburg project for eventual transfer to NLM. That processing of the Williamsburg materials took 3 years, 12 meetings of about 8 volunteers at each session. As Priscilla mentioned, TMBAP paid for the meals and lodging, and of course is very grateful and appreciative of their time, efforts, and commitment to the cause. TMBAP also provides administrative staff for some projects to assist in preparation. It hires an independent contractor to prepare, and in some instances, process material, ensuring the work is completed to NLM's archival standards when it's delivered there. Then on the ground, how is it that TMBAP is important? The organization is committed to being a good steward of stakeholder donations for archival preparation. And to such ends, it has established policies and procedures. It has a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, and contracting committee to work with independent contractors to sign a contract agreement for each archival project. The MOU identifies the following: the details of the independent contractor working relationship and the partnership, the scope of archival work to be completed, the budget and cost of work to be completed, and the time frame in which the work will be completed. TMBAP monitors the process to ensure processed archives are delivered to NLM. TMBAP's website serves as a portal into the world of Dr. Bowen's life work that includes a section featuring videotapes such as Dr. Bowen's postgraduate training lectures. The website also gives a visual tour of the archive's many aspects. It has sections on the emergence of theory, the organization's initiatives, and identifies its leadership. One such initiative is the Oral History Project audio interviews that are housed on the website. My goodness, to date, there are 45 interviews spanning several decades that highlight the ways in which many professionals were positively impacted, as Dr. Kerr mentioned, by Bowen theory and by Dr. Bowen himself. In its recent years, TMBAP is emphasizing its commitment to scholarship. That includes this and 3 previous webinars. This webinar, as will Andrea Shera's 2022 webinar, will be posted on the website for viewing. TMBAP is in the process of updating its brand and communications program, so stay tuned. Wow, and what amounts of money has TMBAP actually funded or approved projects for funding? So to date, I'm just going to round numbers up, getting closer to $61,000 total. And the various projects that have been mentioned, but I wanted to summarize them here so you could see it all in one group. The Mary Bowen Project, almost $2,700. The Bowen Center Professional Paper Separation Project, almost $12,000. The Williamsburg Assessment Project, again, $25,000. The Bowen Center Library Project, $14,000. And as Priscilla mentioned a few moments ago, the Andrea Sheriff Photograph Project in 2 phases, the first phase being $6,000 and the second phase, $1,550.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
What Siri's doing here with me?
Probably.
It's always a little frightening to have Siri jump into the middle of something. Anyway, what aspects of the archives are waiting to be funded? The NLM Audio-Visual Project, which contains 800 videotapes and 1,300 audio tapes. The entire video collection from the Bowen Center has been transferred to NLM, with the last group being transferred in 2019. Then finally, at the moment, there's the Williamsburg project, and it's going to need significant funding, and its budget is being determined through the currently funded Williamsburg Assessment Project. Those archival materials include professional papers and personal memorabilia. Thank you.
And thank you, Kent Webb, for bringing all of this together. And we have a couple of questions in the chat. The first one was directed to Priscilla, and is a very practical one. It says, when the negatives are digitized, can they be viewed as positives?
Yes.
Well, that's what I thought. So thank you. And yeah, that would be a normal process of the digitization. Now, here's a question that was originally directed to Priscilla Friesen, but it may require some help from all of our presenters. Exactly how many items are in the archives? How big is it? I mean, do we have any, I mean, it's got to be an estimate, but anybody want to take a stab at that at all?
I think you're right, Ed. It's going to take kind of a couple people answering that. I know Joanne Bowen has a linear feet of the materials that are actually at NLM. I think we're working towards getting a linear feet of what's at the Bowen Center institutional records.
Now, these are linear feet of filled boxes. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly, paper. So that's one of the ways in which archives evaluate kind of how much material, how many materials are actually required to kind of how they talk about the work with the archiving of that. That'd be something Joanne could speak a little bit more to. I think the other thing I'd like to just mention, I think Kent mentioned the audiovisual collection. This is something that I think the exciting part of this is that when we worked on preserving these materials back 30 years ago, it was very, very costly. And we were unable to kind of acquire the level of costs, you know, like $500,000 at the time. Now the costs are much better, and they're digitized, and you don't have to replicate the processing of the stabilizing of the format. So I think this is an important next step, which would be to be able to stabilize these once and for all. And digitizing, of course, makes these available to at a digital level to the whole collection itself. So
we're moving into a very good era to be doing this archival work.
Exactly.
The new processes. We do have one question here. It says, if I wanted to make a donation to process a specific part of the collection, could I do that? Perhaps Kent Webb, you could.
Sure. Of course, a person can designate which project they would like their donation to be contributed to, and then that's where their dollars will be applied.
Okay. Well, if you have any more questions that you would like to address to any of our presenters or to the Murray Bowen Archives project in general, you can direct your questions to our email info@murraybowenarchives.org, and we will see that the appropriate person is able to be in touch with you. And let's see. And see, it seems we've had a couple more questions pop up here. Kent Webb, you mentioned the audiovisual collection was already at NLM. Is that just the material for Dr. Bowen's life and time, or does it extend to the 21st century interviews at the Bowen Center?
I'm going to punt that question to Ms. Priscilla Friesen.
The videotapes that are at NLM have been donated. They are all the tapes that existed in Dr. Bowen's lifetime and are primarily ones of him and of Bowen Center productions that were done during his lifetime. There are tapes that have been made since that do not include Dr. Bowen himself, that are not included in what I was referring to exactly. The interesting thing about having the audiovisual tapes already at the National Library of Medicine, I think, is that, first of all, they are protected and they're in cold storage and they're safe. That's not as true for the ones, let's say, at the Bowen Center, or probably other ones that are around the network. Those tapes that are in storage are the ones that would be some of those are digitized already, but most of them are not. So that would be the set of tapes we were talking about being at NLM and already donated. At this point, there are no further tapes being accepted into that collection at NLM.
Okay. We do have a message here from Amy Post. She says, if somebody wanted to volunteer, I will have a project this summer. Maybe others would have additional opportunities. So you might be able to join in working on one of these projects. We do have a general question open to all of our presenters, and asking if any of you would like to share how this curation process is for each of you at this time in your life and in your own careers, and what's it like to be engaged in this work? I believe, Catherine, you addressed your many, many years of working on these archives and recently brought them to fruition in your own publishing. So.
Well, I've been a member of the Murray Bowen Archives project since 2010. And for me, it was a way to let other people have the opportunity that I have to try and move this to having an open collection. And I do believe that others will make their own discoveries when that's possible. I mean, it's possible to some extent right now, but I do believe there's a lot to be discovered in this collection. That was a worthwhile cause for me to contribute my time to. So I found it helpful. I had opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise in my life. It made my life more interesting, honestly, to be involved with this project. And it's a worthy cause.
Yes, well, it's clear you were chasing after how his thought process is developed, and that thank you for documenting your discoveries.
Yes, that was my primary interest. There's one thing I meant to say that I forgot earlier, but it's my opinion that the finding or starting the Bowen Center, the Georgetown Family Center, was an experiment by Dr. Bowen to apply the ideas to an organization and see what he learned from that. And I think he was trying to create an environment where that would foster differentiation. And then he could add that more fully to the theory. That just occurred from doing this preparation for this presentation. That would fit with how he developed the theory.
Okay. We have a note here that if you are interested in volunteering your time or interest at TMBAP, please reach out to us. And Ann Gordon Curran, you put your hand up. Would you like to actually say something to all of us?
I'll try to actually say something.
All right.
No, I would like to, I'm wondering if I could see the screen again about the costs that have been attached to various projects.
Oh, I don't know about that. It'd be lost in the deck, but
it was at the end.
I'll leave that to the technical
There it is.
folks. Oh, there we go. It is
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, as we come to the conclusion of our evening tonight, I want to wind up my portion by thanking you all and allowing me to be the moderator tonight. And our final comments as we conclude will be made by Kent Webb. So Kent.
Well, if you've been inspired, I've been inspired by my involvement with the Murray Bowen Archives project from the time that I began my involvement with it. But if you've been inspired by what you've seen and heard tonight, your donation can help us get Dr. Bowen's archives processed and available to the world. Please consider donating by clicking on the link that we've provided in chat. Or feel free to visit our website at any time after tonight and simply click on the donate button to support this important work. Of course, you can always send a check to the address identified on the website. As always, TMBAP is available to answer any questions that you might have about tonight's presentation. I wish to thank everybody for attending tonight's webinar party to celebrate Dr. Bowen's birthday. And in my opinion, it's been a great party. There are many people to thank who've made this webinar a reality. And I start by acknowledging how grateful and appreciative TMBAP is to its first ever webinar sponsors, Ms. Allison Whitney, Dr. Bill and Ms. Linda Dwyer, and the Kamek Family Fund. TMBAP's stakeholders deserve such a special thanks, as they are a big reason that TMBAP exists, and their continued investment in its mission is so important. Of course, the Bowen family deserves such an enormous thank you for its continued support and engagement with TMBAP as a committed partner, moving toward a shared Bowen archival vision and mission. And thanks to Ms. Victoria Harrison, Dr. Michael Kerr, and Reverend Randy Frost for their endorsement of TMBAP via their webinar cameo appearances, and award-winning, would you please bring the trophies, if I may say so. TMBAP's volunteers require a standing ovation for their work that includes thousands of hours and spans several decades. The archives wouldn't be alive if it weren't for their contributions. This group of volunteers also includes the Murray Bowen Archives Project's Board of Directors. And as the saying goes, and I know well myself with the last name that ends in W, last but not least, a heartfelt thank you is extended to the webinar presenters, Ms. Catherine Rakow, Dr. Joanne Bowen, and Ms. Priscilla Friesen. And my goodness, I couldn't have done any of what I did for this webinar if it weren't for the webinar program coordinators, Ms. Teresa Edmondson and Ms. Elise Steenberg, TMBAP's administrator and program manager. This group was central in making this event happen. So all good things have to come to an end, so it's time to wrap this party up. So good night, and again, thank you, everyone.